Hello. Welcome to Retouching Revealed. My name is Liz Mooney. Today we will be retouching a beauty image shot by Sophie Kietzmann. On this channel, we're going to be live retouching and talking about how post-production works, why certain, oh, hold on, sorry. Why certain retouching decisions get made, how retouching is done. This is mostly about understanding process and not calling out any ills in the industry. Maybe we'll see. But yeah, let's get into it. So today we are retouching an image shot by Sophie Kietzmann that we produced specifically for this channel to discuss natural retouching and what that means, what that even looks like, what kind of work goes into making an image even look natural. And here we go. So on this image, I've already done a little basic color to get it sort of where I want it to look. And I'm just going to start with starting with the first little bits of acne that I see. Typically, that's the first thing that gets addressed in retouching. If we do have talent who has acne, generally clients don't want that. Yeah. So usually when I start retouching, I sort of, my Z key is sticking. Oh. That sucks. Wow. Can I do this without it? Let's see. Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. So when I approach retouching, especially for like getting a natural sort of skin look, I kind of like to over retouch first and then sort of dial it back in to get a real feel. Sometimes I kind of think of it like finishing a piece of wood where you like go in and like pick out all the knots in the wood first or anything that's going to cause like structural weakness or visual imperfections, all the big things first. Pulling out a couple stray hairs here, and I think I'm gonna take out her ear there. Right now I'm using the clone stamp tool, completely feathered, and I'm just like removing some acne scarring. Depending on, like, you know, what your goal is with the image, a lot of times I truly don't think you need to take out acne scars or scars like that. I think it adds nice texture. But for the purpose of this video, I'm gonna take them out. And for this image, we want, this is what would be considered in the industry like a pretty standard, like, beauty editorial image. And generally the standard is to have, unless is specifically to show acne, is to remove any acne marks. Oh yeah. That is weird. I didn't even notice. I'm sorry. The screen is not showing my retouching. I didn't even notice that. That's so weird. Sorry about that, everyone. I will turn off my... I'll restart the retouching, because I didn't get that far. And let me just figure out why this isn't even... why this isn't working. That's really weird. Ah! Let me resize that. Great. Thank you, guys. I'm sorry that I didn't catch that right away. I was in retouching mode. Okay, so now that you can all see what I'm doing, this is an image shot by the wonderful photographer Sophie Kietzmann. Oh man, okay, I see. There's quite a lag from what I'm doing to what you're gonna... Let me wait for the stream to catch up. Okay. Okay, so this is an image shot by Sophie Kietzmann, of a great model named Julia. We produced this shoot specifically for this retouching channel to, you know, look into retouching techniques, industry standards, talk about why retouching is done, how we do it. And today, yeah, we're going to be looking at natural retouching. As I was saying before, but you couldn't see me doing it, I usually start after, you know, applying some local color and a, like, overall color and some grain. If it's an image where we're going to be removing acne and skin texture, I just move around the entire image usually with the stamp tool, but not always. And when I switch to another tool, I'll talk about it. And just kind of doing the heavy lifting, retouching work of removing acne scars, blemishes, texture from the makeup. This is typically the part for me that takes the longest. It's sort of where the joke is in the industry, that like natural looking retouching actually takes longer. Because I'm sure you've all seen many YouTube video tutorials about how to retouch skin super quickly, and they always just end up having a very heavy-handed look. That's sort of isn't natural and definitely wouldn't fly generally in the beauty world. Especially for like skincare, and they like we're luckily I'm sure we all have remember the retouching when Photoshop first came out. They were just like completely blown out and super smooth. Overall in the industry right now, we are celebrating skin texture and at least allowing some of it to stay, even artfully retouched, to feel natural than how things used to be. A little bit of retouching ADHD, where I have a hard time staying in one place for very long on the image. I'll do a little skin over here and then I'll have to like jump to another part. Just keep my brain stimulated. I think it also helps me sort of not hyperfix in one area. So I can keep looking at the image as a whole. I think that also helps it kind of stay more real. Something that I always find really interesting about like close-up beauty photos is that you can really see how the makeup was applied in a way that you would never ever notice in real life or on set. And you can almost always see the makeup artist's like pencil brushes or brush strokes in behind people's eyebrows when they get filled in. And it sort of sometimes ends up looking a little discolored. I'm going to switch to doing a little dodging and burning now to smooth out the brush strokes in the eyebrows. I don't know how well it's going to translate onto YouTube with the compression. But a lot of times I'll zoom, especially when I'm doing dodging and burning, I'll zoom really far out. So I can really see like the value changes. And then like turn the layer on and off. I might have overcooked the eyebrow. A lot of times I'll also do like the value changes first and then worry about like color changes. Adjusting the color after. Oops. All right, back to more skin. So, Dark Shutters has asked why I use this file structure. I use this file structure because it helps keep me organized, but the main idea behind it is, that you want to try to keep your files when you're doing retouching, especially professionally and especially if you're working for a client, because they do tend to change their mind a lot, and there can be a lot of back and forth, and especially with skin work where you might overwork it here and then bring it back there, or decide that you like all the skin retouching you've done, but you want to bring back more under the under eyes. The more flexible you leave your file, meaning layered and not flattened, not making a color move and flattening it into your base layer, the more you can change it. When I worked in-house, we we would work a whole job in black and white. And then the client would be like, actually, we're going to do this whole campaign in color now. And if we had done all of our retouching and color work flattened into the file, we would have had to start completely over. So my file structure, my base file structure, sometimes, we build on it and it gets more complicated, is the background layer, a nested retouching layer on top, and that'll have any retouching moves I move. I try to keep that as layered as possible. So a lot of times I'll have this when I retouch a file, I'll end up having 3 layers. One, which is this like sort of heavy lifting. And then the next layer would be dodging and burning, overcooking, as we like to call it in the industry a lot of times, just going way too far. Kind of like Facetune blur levels. And then I'll have a 3rd layer that I will brush back texture in areas and sort of finesse, bringing back dimension on the skin from the light. So like bone structure, texture, little moments that feel like really real and human rather than fake. And then on top of that, in another nested folder, we have the overall color. Usually for me, that's a hue saturation adjustment, contrast, and then color curves. Typically, I like to do color moves on top of contrast moves, which is just values. Because when you do them the other way, the contrast moves on top of the color affect the color a little more unpredictable. But this is a very classic sort of, Vogue, like high-end fashion, sort of super pristine way of doing color, the way that I was trained. And lately, there's been so much more room creatively to have a little funky color, have things compressed and flattened, kind of do things the wrong way to get those more. Honestly, people are trying to make their images look like how they looked when we would tear them out of the magazines, scan them, and put them back up on the internet for everyone else to see. And that's why they kind of have that sort of like flat texture quality, to the point that a lot of photographers are actually printing their retouched images and then scanning them back in before they submit them to their clients or publications. And then the final layer would be grain. And grain's really important for hiding the digital feeling of photography. When we turn the grain off, and again, I'm not sure how well this is going to translate onto YouTube because of the compression. But without the grain, the files just feel very digital and empty, and you can really see that they're pixels, and they're missing that like photographic film quality that that film just has naturally baked into the, into the film, like, so we always add grain to kind of bring it back into reality a little bit, because photography isn't real. When it is too digital or too smooth, our brain perceives it as being uncanny, and something about adding the texture back in, makes us feel more comfortable. So yeah, the edgier the image, or like how chunky it is, you can add more grain. Grain also does a really great job of helping with the banding that can happen in color and in retouching, and hide retouching mistakes, or like sort of like pen and brush marks. Yeah. This sort of like stylized photography that happens in the beauty world, the fashion world, the celebrity world, is sort of like in a gray space between, not even a gray space, but it's fully not documentary photography, but there still is like an expectation for the photos to be reality a lot of the time and to feel like reality. Even though, everything about it is just as produced as movies are, for instance. So adding grain is just one of those things that, like, I guess the word is unreality. Yeah, like, sort of creates the feeling that this highly produced thing is more real than it is, I guess. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that well, but I'm going to take out some of the veins in her eyes so they're a little less distracting. Right now I'm using the stamp tool again, set to lighten. I don't usually like to take them out all the way or over brighten the eyes, because again, it starts to like go too far into the realm of unreal. And like with natural imagery, or with a natural retouching approach, you're trying to find the fine line between like this person on their best day ever, versus, over retouched and feeling fake. There's a few famous photographers that you can see their lighting equipment in the in the model's eyes. They like to have you sort of only have one catch light, like take out anything that could let anyone, use a loop to look in onto their model's eye. And this is why we always turn our file on and off, because sometimes you leave a little shadowy spot. I miss having that little reflection there, so I'm gonna put it back. Okay. I'm going to switch to the patch tool and see if I like the way that it takes out that blemish. Sometimes I don't like it because it sort of disconnects, doesn't match up with the texture. Maybe that's kind of working. Let's see. Maybe I can blend it in a little better. Gonna work on this corner of her mouth a little. It's got a little dryness here, and also maybe the makeup was spreading a little. This day was one of the coldest days in New York, and my train was down that weekend, so and it was for everybody to get to the studio. So we all had to take the bus, which meant standing outside in like negative degrees for a very long time. So I think probably this model was also stuck outside and her lips got a little chapped. Not that. What is your standard to distinguish which details to leave and which to keep in order to preserve a natural look? And what are your best tips for working quickly and saving time? Let me think about that. A starter standard for me is to, and this is pretty common in the industry as well, is to not change anything fundamental about the model that would still be there after 2 weeks. So if they have a bruise or a blemish, like being acne, typically we wouldn't take those out. We would take those out because they're not like forever things about the model. They're just like, incidentals. Like if it wouldn't be there in 2 weeks, take it out. But there's so much more to consider than just that. Typically, for me, with my retouching approach, one of the first things I think about is what's the purpose of the image. So is it a beauty image? What's the focus of the image? Is it her mouth? Is it her eye? Is it her skin texture? Is it the hair? And I try to let that guide what I focus on in retouching and what I highlight. But well, so like for instance, let me think about it. I think, well, maybe it'll be easier if I just talk about what my approach is for this image specifically, because I think I'm going too broad in my head, and um so in that regard, like my thought process for what to keep, what not to keep, um kind of is a mix of micro and macro. Um, so I want the hair slick to look really nice, and I kind of look over around the whole image to be like, is there anything visually distracting that's taking away from showing off her features, her makeup, her, so in this case it's the eyelashes, her features in general, the slicked hair, her lip. And I look at the image overall and I think, is anything pulling my focus away from that? So for me, on this image, and a lot of times this is like how I would make markups if I was sending the file to somebody else to retouch. Um, I would look at anything that was like pulling me away from here, and also like compositionally, if this, this image is centered very much right here on her face. And I want to keep your eye moving around the image here and not have you like shoot off one direction, or, have your eye trail off another direction. So I wouldn't want you, I would get, I feel like I'm getting distracted by these elements. Um, and for instance, when it isn't retouched, I do notice like the makeup application here, so I'd want to smooth that out. I think this might be a scar, but it could be the makeup. Even still, going back to what's the purpose of the image, I do find it distracting and not, essential to her as a person. So it's like safe to take it out. There's like cakey makeup here that's pulling my attention away, where, I'm kind of getting stuck on it a little. And the same thing with like the same thing with these little bits of where the gel has dried and is catching the light. I'm getting caught up looking here and here. Because the image is so high res and so close up, you can see details in the skin and in the makeup application that you wouldn't see on a regular person, which does make it a little complicated when you're doing retouching, or, working in photos in general, because you're suddenly being made aware of all these, little moments on people's faces that catch your eye that you never see in real life. And it could put you mentally in a situation where you fixate on them and you overthink it, or you start to develop like little complexes, about things that are totally normal. So it's a mix of trying to keep everyone to trying to direct focus in the image without kind of losing your mind a little bit and going too far. So like the reason I marked up these areas around the nose here is this texture is from the makeup and the powder is pulling a lot of my attention, and it looks dry. I want her skin to feel as, you know, kind of as dewy and glossy as the rest of her skin over here. And in terms of keeping it natural, once you've sort of removed all these more distracting elements, and even her skin, her acne scarring could, if that was where you wanted to take the image, if that was a part of your brief or what you wanted to show, I don't think it's actually pulling that much attention. You could, if we were gonna, for this, I'm gonna take it to a complete retouch, but I can, after I've done that, I can brush back and show you how you could still keep it, but just reduce how much attention it draws. Because a lot of retouching is about directing your attention, and it gets confused for over perfecting people and people kind of getting in these complexes in their head about how things should look instead of focusing on the art part of it. So even if we wanted to like not take out her skin texture all the way, I would just like dodge and burn these to just reduce the contrast they have between the dark parts and the light parts. So it's not as visually busy. Another thing that I do is I look at the image from pretty far away, and I look at, this is, you know, back to the natural look. To keep it natural, you want to pay attention to how the light is falling on somebody's face, the structure of their face, the muscles, the bones, the muscles and fat on top. And for this, you can see that she has like a pretty essential bone structure markers here. Like that's a pretty big shape on her face. You know, I kind of try to break up the face into a bunch of essential like shape blocks and be mindful of not, like there's this plane here moving here, there's this one moving this direction, this one coming around the mouth here, this one turning this way. And not to disturb those unless the way the light is hitting them is, again, visually distracting, but you can minimize without changing someone's face. So after I retouch more, you know, generally I would probably lighten this area a little bit, not remove the structure of her face, you know, with the shape of her eye and her eye bags here. I wouldn't remove these bits. I would just probably brighten here and try to just remove, you know, reduce the repetition of these shapes. Dark, a little lighter, dark, a little lighter, dark. So that it feels simplified. And in terms of doing it quickly, I think make your decisions fast and then tinker them backwards. So instead of overthinking it while you're doing it, just go super hard and fast at, like, you know, taking out blemishes, you know, like just really, you can do it actually really quickly. It's faster to just do it and brush it back and at least for me, you know, and then finesse it than it is to you know, take a long time thinking about it. For me, my main tools are the stamp tool and dodging and burning. Those are the golden standards for skin retouching. I know a lot of people do oh, you're welcome. A lot of people do frequency separation. I don't love frequency separation because I think it separates you from the overall image as a piece of art, and I think it's really important to look at retouching and image making cohesively. And I also just like, retouching is also an art, and so if you're using a retouching technique, and, you know, this is your full-time job, retouching, and you're using a retouching technique that you hate doing, maybe use a different one, because if you're doing this 8 hours a day every day, like I often am, you have to have a practice that's sustainable for yourself, or you'll lose your mind. Okay, so I'm sort of at a point with the skin, and I'm not going to touch the hair right now because well, I'll touch the hair right now. I was going to say, I kind of want to focus on doing the skin, like for like talking about natural skin, but the entire thing is about natural image retouching. So we'll naturally retouch the hair. Zooming in really close so I can pay attention to getting the strands of hair lined up. This is another example where you're going to be doing this fine retouching work really close, but you're not really going to be able to tell how it reads and how it looks, or if it looks kind of choppy and weird, until you zoom out and look at it from far away. A lot of times doing hair like this, or like cable knit sweaters, you'll go in and you'll get all the cable, you'll stamp hairs or, fix twists in the cable knit, and then you'll look at it from far away and it looks totally ridiculous and weird, and you have to figure out what next to do. What is my favorite kind of retouching? I kind of like it all. I think beauty might be my favorite, because I think I like the artistry of makeup. I like working on hard images, and a lot of beauty retouching can be pretty challenging. Dealing with makeup texture, dealing with skin texture, dealing with lighting problems, dealing with products that weren't obeying, dealing with products that dealing with changes, like they didn't have the right product on set, so we have to change how it looks on the model so that it looks like the right product. But it changes for me from time to time what my favorite is, because I honestly, I get bored. So if I do a lot of beauty retouching for a long time, I get really tired of looking at skin, and I want to look at something else for a while, like product or hair or lifestyle or architecture, or I don't know. I think beauty's probably one of the hardest, because you have to be really careful and strategic to keep the images feeling real and human, and you have to be mindful of how what your brushes are doing, and how the light's moving, maintaining texture. But I will say, after I do a lot of beauty images, I am over it. I'm like, I never want to look at skin again. It also really messes with your head to look at skin that close up all the time, because you're seeing stuff you literally cannot see in real life, and because you don't, you're only seeing a handful of models wherever you have, you're like, is that normal? Do I have that? Most people have little bits of mustache hair here, and then you always have to take it out, because it is distracting, and you want people to be looking at the if you're trying to sell lipstick, you want people to look at the lipstick and the lips, and not be getting distracted by little darker hairs around the mouth, or makeup caught in the hairs around the mouth. And then so you're like, do I have little darker hairs around my mouth? You'll never know unless you get a picture of yourself taken at this level of detail. And at this point, after all these years of retouching, I'm not sure I want to know. I don't think I could. I've never been able to retouch pictures of myself without just not even knowing how to approach it. Because sometimes it definitely requires like being able to separate yourself from who you're photographing. And when I have retouched images of my friend, I have a really hard time editing them because I can't decide what things to take out, because I'm like, oh, but I love everything about you. Like, nothing about you is distracting to me. Like, and I can't be as professionally objective as is required. So right now I'm taking out some of those little gel highlighted bits that I marked up earlier. They were pulling your eye away from the center of her face. Okay. So I am at the point of in my process where I've sort of hit everything major overall in the image. And where I've done a lot of the heavy lifting, picking up the bigger things that I would, retouch and take out. So I'm at the point where I typically switch to just an unbelievable amount of dodging and burning, and texture removing, and sort of flattening everything out a lot more, so that I can then, on top of that very smooth layer, bring back the dimension, bring back the reality, the feeling of reality. Because something I think, I've said it a few times already, but something I really think it's important for people to think about in photography in general, is that photos aren't real. They're a representation of reality. Which doesn't mean we don't have an ethical responsibility to be mindful of the work that we're putting out there. It just means that they're not real. They're representational. That's all. But yeah, I want to think about how I can make this image feel real, understanding that it isn't. So, actually, before I go in and dodge and burn, I'm going to bring the texture down in these places that I marked up earlier, where the powder's sticking a little by the side of her nose. You can see these, this is probably brush strokes, excuse me, here. Some of the texture here from the makeup drying on her skin and around the corners of her mouth. And then I will dodge and burn. Who is my favorite beauty client that I work with? I don't know that I can say that. I don't want to lose clients. What if someone's watching this and then they feel really butthurt that I'm not, you know, that they're not my favorite client? Okay, so pretty easy way to knock down textures is to invert your image. Do a little high pass. 25 is usually the sweet spot for me. Set it to soft light. And this is a technique that lots of retouching YouTubers use to just get everything done all at once, and then they'll brush stuff back in. But I do overall find it to be way too heavy-handed and uniform to be used the way that it gets used a lot. Discretion is key, or discernment. Another thing I do that really helps with brushes, you know, sometimes you can just really feel the shape of the brush, is I'll set my brush to dissolve for my mask, and then I'll feather it to 3 pixels. So instead of being like this, you know, dissolve brush is giving very paint MS98, you know, if you feather it, oops, my bad. It just kind of has that sort of, or I'll do 2, kind of helps with the transitions to feel that sort of like natural transitions. Kind of like the way that the skin is, you know, it's all, you know, it has. All right. So I will warn you, what I'm about to do with taking this texture way down is overall going to be way too far for natural retouching. But you know, it is really effective at reducing texture so that you can go back in and finesse it afterwards. This is, if I was to refer back to my wood finishing analogy, this is when I'm sanding the hell out of the image. And you can see another issue that happens if you use this technique, that it reduces the contrast and the shape of people's features and the light by just kind of just over blurring them. Something else I like to do to like keep a little more of that reality feeling in the images is not get rid of every single nose hair in the nose. You want to take out some of them and, like, you know, any boogers and stuff that can sew. But if you keep a few of these little hairs, because your brain expects them to be there, then it kind of, yeah, it like feels, it feels real and can kind of trick, you know, kind of make you think, oh, well, this image hasn't been retouched all the hell, because that's a very real feature there that everybody has that normally does get, you know, noses end up being like completely blacked out, you know, kind of like this. They look almost like cartoon holes, you know, like, no, like just not even like completely going over the edge, like not even kind of like that. And it's just, it's your brain does pick up on that as not being, doesn't feel true. Something else I think about for like this, retouching standard, what to leave and what not to leave, is with the technology of the cameras, there will be places very close together that are really in focus and places that aren't. And I like to smooth those transitions, not smooth as in smooth out, but make the transitions smoother so it's not so stark. So I'll take like an area like this where it goes from no information at all to very textured, and just make it flow into the textured area a little less abruptly. But a lot of this texture I'll leave. It's not distracting and it looks, maybe I'll do a little dodging and burning, but that's very nice, real texture. It's honestly, once you do like a lot of the really like heavy lifting, it becomes easier to see how much stuff you can actually leave without having to just blast everything. And then right here, I notice an area where her makeup has gotten stuck in the creases. That's definitely something. If it's a beauty, it doesn't even matter. Any retouching job, you want to fix any area where the makeup isn't doing what it was intended to do. So, unless we're doing a look where we're trying to bring out someone's creases, if makeup's creasing or if makeup's gotten dry, we always take that out, smooth it. Especially like at this level of detail on set and with the makeup artist, we can't see that in real life, on set while we're shooting her when she's in the makeup chair. It's too small. So a lot of this stuff is adjusting the image to what our expectations of what people look like, because we're getting so much more information about someone's face and their features than our eye can see when we look at them in real life. So I'm back on my regular retouching layer underneath the high pass layer, just picking off a couple more of these hairs that I'm seeing here that I didn't grab on the first go round. Another thing I like to leave for a natural feel is the edges of people's face where they're, you have a little hair. Not cleaning, not making it ultra smooth and flat, like that, if I can get away with leaving it, if a client doesn't call it out, I don't touch it. So I'm going back to my dissolve layer, and I'm gonna go crazy on this more textured and dry area around her mouth. And I hopefully it's coming through into the YouTube. But again, with the inverted high pass layer, and sometimes it's good, but it goes really hard on making it blurry and reducing the contrast, and that is a feeling when you look at it from farther away, where it starts to feel like a little foggy and blotchy, and we lose sort of the drama of her own cheekbone and the way that the light hits her face. So now I'm going to switch to doing dodging and burning. I kind of do it in like two chunks. Sometimes I'll have a dodge and burn like 50% gray layer, set to soft light on top. And then to do like the big shapes, so I'll use that layer for redirecting light if a lot of times most of the time the light is fixed and the model is moving, and they'll pick a shot where the model's face is turned a little more and it's not hitting their face the best, like the light could have been up a little higher, a little lower, in my opinion. And so I will often, oops, sorry, I hit the mic there. Hope that wasn't loud. Kind of redirect the light on this layer. So this is for like big changes, big shapes, big brush. So, and I'll even zoom sorry, I hit the mic again. I'll zoom the image out really far to look at just the way the light is hitting her face. And, I see that this shape of her the shadow here is being broken into a couple, different regions. So I'll simplify that from this distance because it allows me to focus on the the light overall and the way the light's falling on her face more than just her texture or the little motions. So what I'm seeing when I look at this image from this distance is a little bit of darkness under her eye here, but I want to try to lighten it without changing the structure of her face. And I do recommend, like, if you get into beauty retouching, like maybe taking, looking at an anatomy book or taking, practice drawing, because I took a few they were artistic anatomy classes because I went to art school, not med school or anything, with no science degrees here. But it made such a huge difference, learning bone structure, learning the structure of the face, what's actually happening underneath that the light is moving over. And, I try not to overthink it too much right now. Like, oh, am I going too hard? Am I changing her features? Because I'm going to go double check that at the end, closer to the end. Oh, and then I gotta make sure I don't get too into like switching into detail mode when I'm on this one. Okay, now I'm gonna go, yeah, okay. And work on skin texture and those, smoothing the skin that way. Still dodging and burning. I'm just using a standard round brush. I have the exposure set super low. I always turn off protect tones, because it tends to, it dramatizes colors. So if, in red areas, you see it, we'll compare. Well, it's not a great example, but other times, it'll like really start to like change the color. And in general, for the worst. Sometimes you need to turn it on. I've noticed it a lot with things that are like super red or yellow, or if the dodging and burning is making things ashier or more desaturated. And again, I think one way to, have a faster process is to not like super overthink it. Just work quick, just move and adjust later. When I dodge and burn, I try to pay attention to like which one I'm using more than the other. If I'm burning a lot, I'm like, okay, like let's check and see, because you can accidentally like darken a whole patch of area if you're just like burning, and you bring the whole value down instead of like jumping back between the two, like I am now, but I'm using a hotkey, so it doesn't show up on the screen. There are hotkeys for like switching to the stamp tool and stuff like that, but I can never, ever remember what it is. Oh wait, it's S. Oh, just kidding. But there's hotkeys for like changing your blending mode, and I can't remember what they are. If anyone in the chat remembers, let me know, and I'll try to work that into my routine too, because anytime I have to like go up here to switch my blending mode, that's seconds I could have been stamping. This part is probably what most people find the most tedious about retouching, especially beauty, is the dodging and burning. And I kind of get it, but I also don't get it at all. I just like kind of go no thoughts, only blotches, and yeah. So yeah, I'm kind of applying the same, smoothing light transitions and stuff idea to her mouth. Area, I don't know if it's freckles, skin texture, or whatever, but just making the way one part of the image moves into another a little more simple. And again, we might just decide it's too far and just bring it all back. Is it the brackets? Let's try. Do I have brackets? Nope. That's brackets is brush up and bigger and smaller. That one I do know. Is it Shift Plus? Oh, you got it. Okay, let's see if I remember that. It is Shift Plus or minus. I don't even know if that's faster because I am on like a micro keyboard, and my Shift and Plus keys aren't super close to each other, so I have to go two-handed anyway to do it. So I don't know if it's like if that's any faster than me just going up here. That's I did I didn't start using Photoshop when I was 4. I don't even think I started using Photoshop 5 maybe, and I used it to make paper dolls. There's a Japanese digital paper doll art form called kisake, kisake, and how everyone was making dolls at that point was you'd make the assets in MS Paint, and then we would code them in text notes, like in like text notes, like in like not even in Word, like in like I don't even remember what we used to code them. No, not CS5. 5. Photoshop 5. Like there wasn't even CS yet. Like it was one of the old ones that had like the black and white sort of pixelated eye image. I didn't know how to use Photoshop for like Photoshop reasons until I got a MySpace. Many years later, my dad saw me making the digital paper dolls in Photoshop, and he was like, in MS Paint, and he was like, there's a better application for that. And I got into Photoshop, and I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't want to use it, so I didn't. But then I was a wannabe scene kid in the early 2000s, and the way to make my images super moody was to use them in Photoshop. The bulk of my retouching training I got working in-house at a studio named Gloss. I knew how to use Photoshop pretty proficiently before I got there, but I did not know how to retouch. Not like this. I knew the tools, but the retouching approach and what the industry standards were, I didn't know anything about that, or how to do color at the level that they were doing. I didn't know any of that. Something else that also comes into consideration for like natural retouching is like where the image is going to go. Like how big is it going to be in the world after, when it's released. So how you approach the image will change based off whether, it's going to be this size on your phone or smaller, most likely. Or in a storefront or on a billboard or printed in a magazine. Things that I'm going to leave here for a natural retouching approach. If this image was going to be going in a store printed large in a bus shelter, I would need to remove, because there's a very big difference in what you can see at an image this size versus, you know, this big, and you're standing next to it at a bus and suddenly you can see that might even be a dead pixel, like that, this little piece of glitter here, or a dead pixel. It really does, like, usage really does change what does natural mean. And again, a lot of it is like helping people feel comfortable looking at images of people, you know, 500, 300, more than that, you know, thousands of percents more close up than you can see in real life. It is very much like looking at a person under a microscope. Did y'all ever have to, did you have that lab in high school where they made you look at your fingernails with a microscope? Because that's a formative memory for me. I'm wishing I hadn't seen that. And I think about it a lot when I'm retouching, about like, some things were just not meant to see that close. And like, yeah. A lot of the problems with retouching and photography are that we just like aren't supposed to see other humans at this level of detail. Okay, I'm gonna zoom out again and look at sort of what I've been doing. Oops. Overall, there's a lot of this. Dodging and burning is always tricky for me, because it puts my brain in a mode where I'm like, am I seeing splotches? Are there lines on my screen? And I sometimes can't tell, and I have to leave and go back with fresh eyes. There's often a funny like a running gag in the retouching and like client world where you're like, okay, I think these look good, but I've been looking at them way too long, so I'm gonna like go close my eyes and I'll look at them in the morning and see if I turn them into nightmares, if I overdid it, you know. Most of the time, no. Most of the time it's just that I stop being able to see, in a sense. Knowing when to stop is definitely the hardest part. Sometimes when I get to this point where I can't tell if I'm just making a dodge and burn blotchy mess, that's when I'll stop and start working back and forth with my other layers, like bringing things back, working the image a little more. Doing a natural retouch is definitely doing a natural retouch definitely takes a lot more consideration and time than not doing a natural retouch. So part of the reason why I'm just way overdoing it and like kind of smoothing out every area with dodging and burning and transitions is so that I have a basis of like, okay, yeah, that's definitely too far. It kind of makes it easier to decide where I am going to end up. Because I can tell that's definitely not it. And when I'm working on a group of images all from the same shoot, I notice that the first image from the group usually takes me the longest, because that's where I'm kind of working out what decisions I do want to make that's going to be applied to all of them. And then the next ones, I don't have to be thinking about where the mark is or what changes I have to make. I can just go apply them, you know. Am I working against that? No. Okay. This video will be available after this stream. I'm going to either re-upload it at a higher quality, or leave the stream up as like a permanent video. Kind of depends on what works best with YouTube, and also when I check it back to see how the quality is, because I am recording my own highest or higher quality of the stream recording onto my computer. If I feel that what has been uploaded onto, like, automatically streamed onto YouTube just could look better, would have more, be of more service with more detail, then I will do that. Sometimes I like to rotate the canvas because it helps me see things a little differently. Also, I find that certain like shapes, movements of my arms, like brush strokes, are easier and more fluid. So if I'm doing an arc like that, then I will rotate the image so that wherever I need to do that arc is aligned with it. And yes, retouchers get carpal tunnel very often, but not me so far. Like, knock on wood. Ooh, the door. So ugly. going to merge my dodging and burning layers down now and probably do some finessing, because turning it on and off, I can see that I have done a little bit of what I was mentioning before, where you end up accidentally creating like new pathways of light and dark from sort of overworking an area at a certain distance. Hmm. Let's see. Definitely feeling pretty okay. Maybe I didn't completely overcook it. But even still, we're gonna go finesse it a little, look at it a little closer. The things I think about when I am at this stage and looking, comparing the image unretouched to retouched are a lot about, like, have I changed anything fundamental about the model? Have I changed anything too fundamental about the light? Is there texture I could bring back that would enrich the image? Especially with a lot of dodging and burning. Excuse me. You can start to get like a little discoloration. Just, doesn't feel super real. And honestly, a lot of, like, looking at her skin from this distance, when I look at it, I kind of miss, like, I feel like there's, and that could be from what I've done so far with, like, sort of overcooking it with dodging and burning, where I feel like that part of her face feels too smooth and is missing texture. And I want to bring it back. Before I do that, though, I'm going to hit a couple areas of local color correction, and I like to do that under my overall color, but on top of the retouching, because then when I turn the retouching on and off to see what changes I've made, those local color changes are nested within it, and it is, it's a part of that the retouching to me rather than just like the treatment. So a couple things I'm thinking about are the corner, there's a little pinkness in the inside of her nose, and at the corners of her mouth, which either feels like chapped or like her makeup is smeared a little. So I want to pull in a little green there, because green is the opposite of magenta. And sort of help make her makeup feel like it's very, her lips very solidly in the center of her lips. Same with the inner part of her nose. Make it feel like the makeup was in there a little more. Her nose isn't a little pink. I also feel like this area here with my retouching, but maybe in the image as well, I want the shadow to feel more like it's all one color. So I think I'm gonna take out a little red. So I'm writing, green minus R for minus red, because in this area I want her mouth and the redness of her mouth to really, the pinkness of her mouth to be sort of where you focus. Same here, I think. But maybe I won't keep those, that's reflected light, the skin reflecting on itself. I might want to bring that back, after I finesse everything. I might decide that it's, kind of takes a little bit of the warmth and life and, the randomness that can be really lovely sometimes. Another thing I noticed, which I might leave, or because it is a nice little difference, trying to decide whether it's from the makeup application. Sorry, got distracted by these little bits here that are calling my attention, and then I'll go back to what I was talking about before. It could be the makeup application, could be the light, or it's my retouching. That on her lip, this side is darker than that side. You know, and depending on what the image is going to be used for, that's a consideration. You know, is the difference a nice editorial moment, a nice little variance? It doesn't matter. We're not trying to sell the lip. We're just going for the overall feeling of the image. Or are we selling lip color, and it's really important that in the image the lip color looks like it's evenly applied. So what I will do is I will start with matching them up a little bit, see how it feels, see how it reads, see how if it works with the overall image, or if the natural variance is fine and we can leave it. Kind of working for me. I'll leave it layered for now, and we'll decide more towards the end. I'm gonna knock down this highlight here too. I think not all the way, because I think it's a nice little buffer to when your eye moves up into that corner, it kicks you back down into the image. But I do feel like my eye is getting pulled up there a little. So first I'm gonna make this highlight a little more uniform, and then I'm going to reduce its contrast. Or maybe I'm just going to leave it, actually, because maybe it was fine. Lip note there. Okay, so after all of that, I am going to kind of I'm going to go back to my earlier, you know, just heavy lifting retouching layer, and to compare that to no retouching, and then to compare that to where we are now, just so you all can see sort of the process that we've gone through again. A lot has changed, but I think fundamentally a lot has also just stayed the same. So this is the part that makes a huge difference. Oops, sorry, I touched the mic again. I hope that isn't loud. With coming back into that feeling of invisible retouching, unreality, where I will take my heavy lifting retouching layer, where all the blemishes and hairs and things like that are cleaned out, so I don't have to worry about retouching those if I brush them back in. Put it on top of my super uber finesse, you know, cleaned up, sandblasted file. Set that layer to lighten, and also a separate layer set to darken. Mask them out, and then use my dissolve brush, my feathered dissolve brush, to paint back in some of the natural variations. Because, you know, it'll bring back, toggling this on and off with the mask, some of those little changes that are totally natural and feel really natural, that aren't there in a super over retouched image, and wouldn't be there because of the retouching standards to, you know, a lot of times to be ultra perfect, ultra smooth. And if we want natural, we have to intentionally keep it there or bring it back in. This is another thing I tend to do. Sorry, caught a hair I want to take out. A lot of retouchers work this way where they're like, okay, I'm going to do this part now. And then they're like, ooh, that thing caught my eye. Let me just zap that before I forget about it. Retouching for me is a mix of like, oh, let me finish that thought to, oh, I got to go do this other thing first before I can finish that thought. And to go back to color correcting again, you know, while I'm in here looking at her brow, I'm going to pull out some of the redness here from the makeup. And definitely like this level of scrutiny, I guess, is primarily exists in commercial imagery. I think that if you are, you know, working on personal work or weddings or more like lifestyle images, portraiture, don't retouch your clients like this. Like, don't color correct their eyebrows if you can, you know, or maybe you can, I don't know, but be very conscious about why you're making this decisions you're making, if they serve the purpose of the image. Are you bringing in your own internal biases? You know, do you have an expectation for people to look a certain way, look different than the way that they look? And really consider that before you alter somebody's appearance. A lot of times in my industry, that ends up looking like, you know, making people thinner than they are, or sort of thinking of certain features as being more masculine, and, you know, expecting women to have certain kinds of features, and so changing them because you think the way that they look is too masculine, stuff like that. Or, you know, expecting people to all have a certain kind of same skin tone, like, or honestly not being very good at representing in photography, like when you're doing your editing, different skin tones than, you know, a white person. I think it can be really important to, like, as you're retouching, be thinking about why are you making the changes, and is it actually in service of the image, or is it because you have expectations of how people should look? So anyway, I had distracted myself. When I was looking at Julia's eyebrow up close, I wanted to make some changes to where her hair is, but, you know, when I look at it from far away, I'm like, I don't know if that's like where we're gonna end up. So I want to I'll go, you know, go back to my, lighten and darken layers, bring back some of the stuff I hadn't changed, some of the stuff I changed, I mean, bits and pieces, and really, really get that supernatural feeling. Super space natural, not supernatural. I usually work with my brush at like 30 to 50%. It really depends on what I've done, how much I want to bring back. Like something I noticed when I turn my light and layer on is that I have darkened this area of her eyebrow a little, so I'm going to bring that a little back. I'm going to bring back some of her natural skin texture on her cheek. See that this area has gotten kind of filled in with the shadow from my retouching. That line's gotten a little stark, which I wanted. I wanted it to be a little more stark, but I think maybe I went too far. Let's see. Let's really look at that under eye area that I dodged and burned some. I don't think I'm changing her features too much with what I've done. Oops. I think I've kept, maybe I'll bring back a tiny bit, the shape of her anatomy while, you know, brightening the area. Really subtly. Bring that back there, that little bit of her hair. Darkness there. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, all right. So can you see in this area here? This is when I had done my over cleaning, and then by bringing back those elements from my original retouching layer, I've really brought back like the sculptural shape of her face. So like the light moving over her face is more smooth here, and for some retouching approaches or some uses, maybe you want that. But for me, I feel like when I turn it back, when I bring these elements back, you can really see the structure of her face so much better and understand her bone structure. Like, I just see that little highlight there, and, you know, initially I took out the dimension, you know, and simplified a lot of this area, thinking that it would look more clean and less distracting. But when I bring it back, you can feel her you can really feel her bone structure and understand the light on her face. And that's so much about what a natural retouching approach is all about. I was really losing with how far I had gone before. I do think from this distance, I do like that lip move. I do think from this distance that just this area right here, where it's lighter here, darker here, lighter here, darker here, is pulling my eye that way a tiny bit. And I'm gonna go in with dodging and burning and just reduce it just a tiny bit. But otherwise, I think this image is in a really great place for a natural retouching. We have kept almost all of the structure of, changed very little about the structure of her face. We haven't kept all her any of her acne scars really, but we have still maintained her texture and um and the character of her face while still doing a full retouch. Yeah. And again, to compare it to like the overcooked version that I had done, just you can just see so much more shape in her face, especially in her bone structure right there, and so much more real skin texture. And this part is tricky because you got to make sure that when you go back in there that you don't start getting, in that little retoucher mind where you're like, ooh, fix the blotches, fix the blotches. Like, go back to what you've done before. Like, click back and forth. Like, take time to think about it or to reflect. And even that might be, I might have done too much again. Like, don't be afraid to just set your layer to 50%. Even 50%. This is 100. Even 50% is more than enough. I think this is a great place to stop for a natural retouch. I think we've left a lot of character, a lot of skin texture, and we didn't change anything fundamental about the image. You can always retouch more, and the knowing to stop is the hardest. Knowing when to stop is the hardest part. Just because you can retouch more, just because there are more things that you could potentially fix, doesn't mean you should. Sometimes you can hit a natural spot and it's perfect. You don't need to do more. Mm-hmm. All right. I think I'm going to stop. That's the hardest part. Thank you all for coming to my first retouching live stream. I hope you found it interesting. I will be doing this every first Wednesday, all on images that I have produced for this channel. And I hope to see you there.